The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, casting geometric patterns across the white marble floors. Isabel Morgan stood at the window, coffee cup warming her hands, watching the city 43 stories below begin its daily chaos. Behind her, she heard the shower turn off in the master bathroom, the bathroom attached to the bedroom that only her husband used. She had her own bedroom now, had for the past 2 years. Ethan had moved to the master suite, claiming his early morning conference calls with London would disturb her sleep. It was a reasonable explanation, the kind that sounded thoughtful and considerate. But Isabel knew the truth. They had simply stopped being a couple and become two people sharing an expensive address. The bathroom door opened and Ethan Reed emerged, already dressed in one of his impeccable Tom Ford suits, his phone pressed to his ear. He was handsome in that sharp, polished way of successful men, dark hair perfectly styled, strong jawline, ice blue eyes that could intimidate boardrooms. At 35, he was 7 years older than Isabel and moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had never failed at anything important. That he walked past her without a glance, his voice crisp as he discussed currency fluctuations with someone in Tokyo. The front door clicked shut 30 seconds later, and Isabel was alone in 8,000 square feet of architectural perfection. 3 years. It had been 3 years since Ethan had touched her with anything resembling desire, 3 years since they had made love, 3 years since he had looked at her like she was anything more than an attractive accessory to his successful life. Isabel set down her coffee and studied her reflection in the window. At 28, she should have been in her prime, beautiful, accomplished, married to one of Manhattan's most eligible bachelors. She had honey blonde hair that fell in soft waves past her shoulders, warm brown eyes, and delicate features that photographers had once wanted to capture. But when she looked at herself now, all she saw was a ghost, a woman slowly fading from existence. Their wedding had been perfect, a fairy tale affair at a vineyard in Napa Valley with 300 guests and coverage in society magazines. Ethan had seemed different then, attentive, passionate, eager to build a life together. He had courted her intensely, flying her to Paris for weekends, sending flowers to her office, talking about the family they would create and the future they would share. The first year had been good. Ethan worked long hours, but he came home to her. They had dinner together most nights, made love regularly, talked about their dreams. Isabel had been working as an assistant curator at a small gallery, a job she loved despite its modest salary. Ethan had been supportive, or so she thought. Then something shifted. A business deal had gone wrong. Isabel never learned the full details, and Ethan had thrown himself into work with manic intensity. Dinners became later, then non-existent. Conversations became perfunctory. Physical intimacy dried up completely. When Isabel had suggested couples therapy, Ethan had looked at her like she was being dramatic. "We're fine," he had said, irritation creeping into his voice. "I'm just busy building our future. Not everything is a crisis requiring therapy." But they were not fine. Isabel had spent the past 3 years withering in their beautiful penthouse, slowly disappearing while Ethan barely noticed. She had stopped working at his insistence. "You don't need to work, focus on the home," but there was no home to focus on. Just empty rooms and long, lonely days. She could not live like this anymore. The decision crystallized as she stood at the window, watching strangers live their lives 43 stories below. She was 28 years old and felt like she was already dead. Something had to change, and since Ethan showed no interest in changing, it would have to be her. Isabel opened her laptop and pulled up the resume she had abandoned 3 years ago. Her background was impressive: art history degree from Columbia, 2 years as an assistant curator at a respected gallery, a natural eye for emerging talent. She could do this. She could reclaim her life. Within a week, she had 3 interviews. Within 2 weeks, she had an offer that made her breath catch: assistant director position at the Romano Gallery, one of Manhattan's most prestigious contemporary art spaces. The offer came from Alessandro Romano himself, the gallery's founder and a legend in the art world. She accepted without telling Ethan. She would tell him eventually, but first she wanted to feel what it was like to make a decision for herself, to step back into the world as Isabel Morgan, not just Mrs. Ethan Reed. Her first day at the Romano Gallery felt like taking her first breath after years underwater. The gallery occupied a converted warehouse. Isabel found herself nodding, her own passion for art, dormant for 3 years, suddenly roaring back to life. I studied this artist in graduate school. Her use of color to represent emotional trauma is revolutionary. Alessandro's face lit up. Exactly. You understand. This is why I hired you, Isabel. You have not just knowledge, but true comprehension. You feel the art. By the end of the day, Isabel had been part of 3 planning meetings, offered opinions that Alessandro had genuinely considered, and felt more alive than she had in years. She drove home with music playing, windows down despite the autumn chill, feeling like a person again rather than a shadow. The penthouse was dark when she arrived at 7. She made herself dinner, a proper meal, not the sad salads she usually ate alone, and was reading in the living room when Ethan came home at midnight. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his usually perfect hair slightly mussed. He barely glanced at her as he poured himself a scotch. "You're still up," he said, not quite a question. "Ethan, I got a job. I started today at the Romano Gallery." He took a sip of his drink, processing. "Oh. If it makes you happy." That was it. No questions about what she would be doing, no curiosity about this major change in her life, no real interest at all. Just polite indifference. "Good night, Isabel," he said, already heading toward his bedroom. The door closed softly, and Isabel sat in the dark living room, feeling the familiar ache of loneliness settle in her chest. But this time, it was tempered by something new, hope. She had spent her first day being seen, being valued, being treated like she mattered, and she realized with sudden clarity that she had not told Ethan about her new job because she wanted his approval or his pride. She had told him because it was the polite thing to do, the expected thing. But she did not actually need his validation anymore. For the first time in 3 years, Isabel Morgan felt like she might survive. More than that, she felt like she might actually thrive, and that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. As she prepared for bed in her own room, the room that had become a symbol of everything broken in her marriage, Isabel found herself thinking not about Ethan's indifference, but about Alessandro's enthusiasm. About the way he listened when she spoke, the way he valued her opinions, the way he looked at her like she was someone worth seeing. It was dangerous, she knew. But after 3 years of invisibility, being seen felt like oxygen to someone who had been drowning. Tomorrow she would return to the gallery, return to the world where she mattered, where her thoughts and feelings and expertise were valued. And maybe, just maybe, she would start to remember who Isabel Morgan was before she became the invisible wife of Ethan Reed. The thought carried her into sleep, and for the first time in years, she did not dream of the life she had lost. She dreamed of the life she might still build. The transformation happened gradually, then all at once. Over the following weeks, Isabel threw herself into work at the Romano Gallery with an intensity that surprised even her. She arrived early, stayed late, and poured her considerable talent and education into every project Alessandro assigned her. The Brazilian artist's exhibition was a massive success, with Isabel's curatorial notes receiving praise from critics and collectors alike. Alessandro had given her significant autonomy, trusting her instincts, and she had not disappointed. Sales exceeded projections, and the opening night gala had been packed with Manhattan's art elite. "You have a gift for this," Alessandro told her the morning after the opening, as they reviewed the previous night's sales figures in his office. "Not just the academic knowledge, but the ability to translate emotion into exhibition design. That is rare, Isabel." They were sitting close together at his desk, shoulders nearly touching as they leaned over the laptop. Isabel could smell his cologne, something sophisticated with notes of sandalwood and citrus. When she looked up to respond, she found him already looking at her, and something electric passed between them. "I learned from the best," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Your vision for this gallery is extraordinary." "Our vision now," Alessandro corrected gently. "You are not just implementing my ideas, Isabel. You are creating your own." Do not diminish your contribution. It was such a simple thing, being given credit for her work, being told she mattered, but it made Isabel's eyes unexpectedly fill with tears. Alessandro noticed immediately, his expression shifting to concern. What is wrong? Did I say something to upset you? No, Isabel said quickly, brushing away the tears. The opposite. I'm not used to being acknowledged like this. Being told my work matters. Alessandro's dark eyes studied her face with an intensity. I wish my husband understood that, Isabel said softly. She had also begun to change physically, or rather, to return to herself. She started buying new clothes, not the conservative, expensive pieces Ethan preferred, but things that made her feel beautiful and confident. Bold colors, interesting textures, styles that reflected her personality rather than her role as Mrs. Ethan Reed. She got her hair cut in a sleek, modern style with subtle highlights that caught the light. She started wearing makeup again, not to hide but to enhance, to show the world she was present and engaged. She joined a yoga studio near the gallery and felt her body become strong again. The effect was striking. Isabel had always been beautiful, but now she glowed with renewed vitality and confidence. Gallery visitors noticed, clients complimented her, and Alessandro's eyes followed her with increasing frequency. At home, Ethan noticed nothing. Or if he did, he said nothing. He continued his routine of early departures and late arrivals, brief conversations about household logistics, separate bedrooms. Isabel had stopped trying to engage him, stopped hoping he would notice her, stopped caring whether he approved of her choices. She was building a life that did not require his participation. The gallery hosted a major event in early December, a holiday showcase featuring multiple artists and collectors from around the world. Isabel had coordinated every detail, from the artist selection to the catering to the strategic placement of pieces to maximize both aesthetic impact and sales potential. She wore a stunning emerald green dress that hugged her curves, her hair styled in elegant waves, feeling powerful and beautiful and completely herself. Alessandro met her at the gallery entrance before the doors opened, his eyes widening with open admiration. Isabel, you look absolutely breathtaking, he said, his Italian accent making the compliment sound like poetry. Thank you, she replied, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. You look quite handsome yourself. He was in a perfectly tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame, and Isabel found herself noticing details she usually tried to ignore, the way his smile reached his eyes, the warmth in his voice when he spoke to her, the protective way he stayed close throughout the evening. The event was a triumph. Sales exceeded even their optimistic projections, and critics praised the exhibition's thoughtful curation. Alessandro gave a speech thanking the team, specifically highlighting Isabel's vision and dedication. The way he looked at her as he spoke, with such genuine admiration and pride, made her feel seen in ways she had forgotten were possible. They celebrated afterward with the team at an upscale Italian restaurant, the mood festive and warm. Alessandro sat beside Isabel, attentive and engaged, refilling her wine glass, laughing at her stories, his hand occasionally brushing hers in ways that might have been accidental but felt deliberate. At one point, someone took a photo of the group, and Alessandro leaned close to Isabel, his arm around the back of her chair, both of them laughing at something someone had said. The photographer captured the moment perfectly, Isabel radiant with joy, Alessandro looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Neither of them noticed when the photo was posted to the gallery's Instagram account within minutes, tagged with the event details and team celebrations. Across town, in a glass conference room overlooking the East River, Ethan Reed sat through another endless meeting. His phone buzzed with a notification. One of his colleagues had liked a post from the Romano Gallery. Ethan clicked it absently, expecting to see art. Instead, he saw his wife. But not the quiet, subdued woman who haunted their penthouse like a well-dressed ghost. This Isabel was vibrant and alive, laughing with her head thrown back in genuine joy, looking more beautiful than he remembered. And beside her, leaning close with obvious familiarity, was a man Ethan did not recognize, handsome, confident, looking at Isabel with unmistakable warmth. Ethan's heart began to pound, his carefully controlled business demeanor cracking. Who was that man? When had Isabel started looking like that, so alive and happy and desirable? And why was another man the one making her smile? He scrolled through more photos on the gallery's account, finding image after image of Isabel and this man, Alessandro Romano. The captions identified him, working together, laughing together, existing in a world Ethan knew nothing about. The meeting continued around him, but Ethan heard nothing. He stared at his phone, at his wife living a life he had not been part of, and felt something he had not felt in years: fear. Raw, visceral fear of losing something precious he had not realized he was taking for granted. For 3 years, Ethan had been so consumed by work. "You're home early," she said, slipping off her heels. "Who were you with tonight?" The words came out harder than Ethan intended, edged with barely controlled jealousy. Isabel frowned at his tone. "The team's celebration for the holiday showcase. I told you about it last week." "Who is Alessandro Romano?" "My boss. I've mentioned him many times, Ethan." Her voice was carefully neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, that Ethan had actually been paying attention. "You looked very comfortable with him in those photos." Understanding dawned on Isabel's face, followed by something that looked like bitter amusement. "You saw the gallery's Instagram. You're all over each other in those pictures. We're colleagues celebrating a successful event." But even as she said it, Isabel felt her face flush, knowing there was truth in Ethan's accusation. She and Alessandro had been closer than just colleagues that evening, the line between professional and personal blurring in ways she had been trying not to examine too closely. "Is something going on between you two?" Ethan demanded, stepping closer. The question ignited something in Isabel, 3 years of accumulated pain and loneliness suddenly exploding into fury. "How dare you," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you ask me that question when you haven't touched me in 3 years? When you've barely spoken to me? When you've treated me like furniture that came with this penthouse? Answer the question, Isabel." "No," she shouted, all her careful composure shattering. "I'm not having an affair with Alessandro or anyone else. I haven't been with anyone because I'm married to you, even though you stopped being my husband years ago." Ethan felt each word like a physical blow. "I've given you everything. Except yourself." Isabel was crying now, years of pain pouring out. "I don't want your money, Ethan. I never did. I wanted you. I wanted a husband who came home for dinner, who remembered my birthday, who knew what I did during the day. I wanted someone who would hold me at night, who would make love to me like I was desirable, who would choose me over another conference call just once." She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. "You want to know about Alessandro? He asks about my day and actually listens. He notices when I get a haircut. He celebrates my successes and values my opinions. He makes me feel like I matter, like I'm not just taking up space in the world. So yes, I enjoy being around him because he treats me like a human being with thoughts and feelings and worth." The elevator doors opened behind her, and Isabel stepped inside without looking back. "I'm staying at Maya's tonight. Don't wait up." As the elevator descended, carrying her away from the penthouse and the husband who had finally noticed her only because another man had, Isabel felt something break and reform inside her. She was done being invisible. Done waiting for Ethan to choose her. From now on, she was choosing herself. And if that meant opening herself to the possibility of connection with someone who actually saw her worth, then maybe that was exactly what she needed to do.